You have to look for controversies in sports. Whispers in the locker room, an agenda-driven person with a phone full of screenshots, and anonymous sources are all necessary. Then there are instances like this one, where all the information you require to fully comprehend what transpired is in front of thousands of spectators in a professional venue, on video, and with audio. There was only a referee, a basketball player, and a technical foul that the entire sports world talked about for the following 48 hours. No research or anonymous sources were needed. The Indiana Fever defeated the Phoenix Mercure on June 22, 2026. Caitlin Clark had 9 assists and 24 points. By all accounts, one of the most watched players in professional basketball at the moment put up a tremendous individual display. However, none of those figures have anything to do with the moment that everyone is still replaying. It has to do with what transpired when Clark approached referee Gerda Datling and posed a straightforward query. For what reason was there a technical foul? Everyone was stunned by Gatling's responses. Clapping. Gatling informed her that clapping her hands was a technical infraction. Give that a moment to land. One of the most well-known players in the sport was given a technical foul by a professional referee officiating a professional basketball game, not for hurling a ball out of frustration, yelling at an official, making contact with anyone, or clapping. And something changed the instant Clark heard that explanation. Not into anger, not into a breakdown, but into something more acute than either. She added, glancing at Gatling, if clapping was the norm, then the officials just didn't like competitive basketball. Then she turned to leave. She then went to the post-game platform and revealed all she had been holding back. Clark didn't appear to be diplomatic when he walked up to the microphone. She was standing in front of reporters after winning a basketball game, and she was already mentally tallying the number of technicals she had left before a ban became inevitable. In less than half a season, 5 technicals. She sits after 3 more. According to both her own and the referee's words, the one that just pushed her to 5 was for clapping. It was absurd, she remarked. She stated it simply, without embellishing it. She then made a statement that got right to the heart of the issue. She informed reporters that she would love to speak with the league directly, formally, and on camera and explain why she was called for a technical foul but no one else on the field was. A genuine explanation, not a PR department statement or a league spokesperson's well-crafted non-answer. Because everyone on the floor should have been subject to the same standard if was clapping that evening constituted a technical foul. It didn't. The whistle went to Clark. No one else did. Additionally, she made a statement that will stick with anyone who pays close attention to this league. Fans should put a game on their calendars right away, she urged the audience, as the suspension is a matter of when rather than if given the speed at which technicals are being awarded. At a press conference platform, a player who had just contributed to her team's victory with an almost faultless performance was calculating her own impending punishment. That's what the WNBA's officiating has brought about, and it didn't begin on June 22nd. Since none of them exist in isolation, you must consider all 5 of them in order to see why this technical foul occurred in the manner that it did. The narrative is the pattern. The first one occurred during a game sequence delay. In an attempt to reroute a ball that had gone out of bounds back toward the scorer's table, Clark kicked it. A bench technical was given as it rolled down the court and bounced in the wrong direction. The majority of experts who watched the play in real time described it as, at most, borderline. It wasn't a pivotal moment, but rather a whistle that raised a few eyebrows. The second came and went with little fanfare. An emotional moment during a close game, a response to a call, and a technical that Clark herself subsequently said was likely to occur. She has done that multiple times this season, standing at a podium and stating unequivocally that a certain technical was on her, that she allowed her emotions to overcome her, and that she accepted the outcome. When you consider the big picture, that kind of responsibility is important because it indicates that Clark isn't out there weeping over every single whistle. She chooses her locations and understands the difference between a call that should not have occurred and one that she earned. It became quite uncomfortable by the third one. In June 2026, Clark was given her 5th foul of the game while defending Jordan Canada on a drive during a game against the Atlanta Dream. She was stunned by the call. With her eyes wide and her body language shouting, she turned right away toward the bench, challenging head coach Stephanie White. There was never a challenge. The whistle was raised. White waited on the bench without ever initiating a review that could have completely changed the course of the game, and Clark's frustration erupted. That element is crucial to remember because it comes back. This league had never witnessed a scenario like the fourth technical foul. Rather than addressing officiating issues in generic terms, Clark called out referee Tyler Merkovich by name as he made his way to the post-game platform. She demanded that the game's officiating be documented because she thought it was unacceptable. Players don't just name officials from a press conference platform. Most sportsmen carefully steer clear of this line throughout their careers. Clark thought that the situation had gotten to the point where general complaints were insufficient, so she crossed it. Next was number 5, the technical clapping. In the fourth quarter, there was a clear emotional moment when Gerda Gatling reached for her whistle and Clark's hands came together. 5 different situations, 5 different games, and 5 technicals all point in the same direction. Coincidence ceases to be a satisfactory explanation when the same player consistently finds herself at the heart of calls that fans, experts, and even the league itself eventually doubt. Reporters turned to Stephanie White following the game. The questions were simple. Her star player had just termed a technical foul ridiculous in public. Her best player was suspended for 3 technicals. One of the most scathing post-game remarks in recent Fever history had been made by her star player. What was said by the head coach? White was measured in her responses. She agreed that the squad needs to be allowed to take a moment as a unit before regrouping. After the situation got out of control, she noted the officials did a wonderful job of bringing it under control. She stated that the players needs to play with what she dubbed poison composure, which is controlled emotion. And that was about it. The internet was thinking. One comment became viral to the point where it was cited in several articles on sports. People continued to wait for Stephanie White to receive a technical penalty for defending her players, particularly Caitlin Clark. That remark went viral because it expressed a sentiment that many viewers were already experiencing, not because it was the most intelligent piece of sports analysis. A composed reaction from the sidelines is not appropriate when your player is at a podium calculating her own suspension out loud. And it wasn't the first time. Return to the Atlanta Dream match. With her entire body, Clark turned to face that bench and begged her coach to defend her. White did not move. Her finest player never faced the task that would have relieved some of the burden. It is undeniable that coaches make deliberate choices about obstacles. However, leaving your players standing by themselves in the center of the court while their irritation grows is not the same as using strategic restraint. This season, Clark has now felt that way multiple times, and whether or not it is discussed in public, the locker room will never forget it. Any team sport analyst would see this growing dynamic as a silent issue. While the coaching staff controls the issue from a cautious, regulated distance, the player is waging her own fights publicly and successfully. Standing at podiums, calling out officials, demanding league reviews, and expressing herself clearly are all examples of how Clark is developing her voice. That player has made the decision to bat for herself if no one else will do it loudly enough. That does not indicate that the gamer is losing control. It indicates that a player has given up waiting for unavailable backup. This entire story revolves around the on-court exchange between Clark and Gatling, which is worth attentively scrutinizing since it reveals everything about how Clark behaved herself when most players would have collapsed. Instead of rushing over, she strolled. She asked rather than threatening or demanding. She approached the official in a composed manner, asking for an explanation without trying to hide her displeasure. She received one from Gatling. The technical was for encouraging and applauding. Provoking. When Clark heard that term, he answered right away. You simply don't enjoy competitive basketball if applauding is offensive. That's just the facts. That's just the way things are. Consider what it would take to think of that solution at that precise moment. Not in a news conference where you have 20 minutes to gather your thoughts, but in the middle of a game, with the crowd watching, the clock running, and your team needing you to remain focused, you are standing in front of the referee who just gave you a technical. She heard an explanation that could not be supported by any logical examination, and she answered it with precision and clarity. She made a fair point, but she didn't make a scene or call the officials' names. Clapping loudly following a disputed foul call is a reaction rather than an act of provocation. Instead of using a series of words that the league would have to deal with, competitors use their bodies to show their feeling that they have been wronged. It exists in every sport. Every night, it is seen in every venue. The league itself was eventually unable to support the notion that this particular player's action in this particular game warranted a technical foul. Both of the excuses offered for what has been occurring to Caitlin Clark in the officiating department this season don't speak highly of this league when you take a step back. The first theory is that certain referees have formed a particular prejudice against Clark, holding her to a standard that they do not apply to the other 20 or so players on the court at any given moment. That would imply that WNBA officiating has turned into a personal matter. It would indicate that the judgment of those who are meant to be impartial arbiters of the game is being influenced by a player's background, profile, and possibly the commotion that follows her into arenas. That is a very serious charge. It's also one that is actually hard to completely rule out given the pattern of calls this season. In a way, the second possibility is more concerning because it doesn't require somebody to be specifically targeting Clark. All it takes for her to be a must-watch on television is for some officials in this league to feel uneasy about the way she plays, the passion, the emotion, and the obvious competition that manifests in her body language, clapping, and fire. This is not a Clark issue at all if that's what's being whistled, and referees are viewing Clark's competitive zeal as a disruption that needs to be controlled rather than a quality of outstanding basketball that should be given room. The issue is one of league culture. The very characteristics that are propelling the WNBA's expansion are being undermined by officials utilizing their whistles. This would imply that the league is gradually working against itself, call by call. Both responses are uncomfortable, and the people in charge of this league ought to take them seriously. The technical was examined by the WNBA. Following Clark's remarks, the video was broadcast on all online sports platforms for 2 days in a row, and the discussion became so intense that it was hard to ignore it. The league considered Gerda Gatling's actions and came to a conclusion. They withdrew it. It is worthwhile to sit with that word carefully since it is doing a great deal of work in this story. Removing a technical foul is not a standard administrative fix. The league isn't discreetly changing a box score. It is an official admission that the call was inappropriate. The WNBA is documenting that one of its officials stood on a professional court and administered a punishment that was so far beyond the bounds of normal refereeing that the league had to make arrangements. Look it up in the record. This highlights a detail that, apart from all the commotion, reveals a lot about the type of player Clark truly is. She expressed her opinion that she deserved a technical this season. She informed reporters while standing at the platform that the officer was correct to call it because she had crossed a cue. That's something she's done several times. She is not a player who categorically denies any criticism directed at her. She is a player who understands the distinction between being wronged and taking responsibility. Her assessment of the scenario, which she gave at a news conference platform hours before the evaluation had started, was validated when the league revoked the clapping technical. There are now 4 technicals. 8 is the suspension threshold. The season's second half is still to come. The rescission is important. The paperwork is important. It matters that the league was compelled to publicly acknowledge a poor decision. However, none of those methods truly address this aspect of the narrative. There is still the same pattern that led to 5 technicals in first place. Fever games are officiated by the same referees. Clark's emotional outbursts on the basketball court are subject to a standard that hasn't been publicly addressed or changed in any way that would affect how the next game is called. One call was removed from the league's records. The fact that Clark is sitting at 4 technicals before the halfway mark of a season with lots of games remaining did not go away. The suspension discussion is merely put on hold if the officiating does not change and the same method of handling her emotional reaction persists. The maths remains the same. 4 technicals, for more until she sits, and a pattern that has already resulted in a string of dubious calls this season. Fans who are keeping a close eye on this are aware of the significance of the figures, and they are watching to see if the league's decision to revoke one call was the start of a real correction or just a necessary step to put the subject out of the news cycle. One version of this story may be presented solely as a sporting controversy. A poor call by the referee is corrected by the league, the player's technical is revoked, and everyone moves on. That version is tidy and ends well, but it completely misses the point. Caitlin Clark is more than simply a basketball player going through a difficult period as an official. The numbers this league is now posting are a result of her. 3 years ago, the stadia were only half filled. Today, they sell out months in advance. Because of the audiences she brings with her, there are now national television deals that did not exist before she entered this league. Because of what Clark stands for and what she has accomplished in a very short amount of time, there is a nationwide discourse about women's basketball on mainstream sports television in barbershops, workplaces, and group chats that never used to discuss the WNBA. That expansion is genuine. The WNBA is currently experiencing a genuine cultural moment. And when those in charge start making choices that don't safeguard what they have, it becomes vulnerable in the same way that all wonderful things are. Giving a technical foul for clapping, having to retract it 2 days later, and letting the coaching staff respond calmly at a news conference as the most significant player in the league publicly plans her own suspension. These are hardly isolated instances of poor management. They are little fissures in a structure that took years to construct and can deteriorate more quickly than anyone cares to acknowledge. When the situation called for it, Caitlin Clark responded as she has each time this season. She asked for responsibility on the record, said what needed to be said, identified the people who needed to be named, and received it. She went on to win the basketball game after that. In a way that the league cannot claim it did not hear, the technical was revoked, the pattern was recorded, and the questions were made public. The WNBA is where the next events take place. The referees who oversee fever games are aware of what is being observed. The review's findings are known to the front office. In times when both of them were put to the test this season, Stephanie White is aware of what her player required from the bench. The record now includes all of that. By attending this league in numbers that no one could have imagined, the fans created something genuine. They are keeping an eye on everything that is being done with the products they contributed to. And that attention is not going away, in contrast to some of the officiating decisions we have witnessed this season.